Hello and welcome to the triumphant return of the great big Autocar off-road test. Now I know we haven't done one of these in a long time, but well, in recent times there have been the launches of some very capable off-roaders. And we thought, what better excuse to bring them all together in the same place. Well, we're here at our favorite muddy playground, 19 degrees north, and the weather seems to be getting a bit worse. So without any further ado, let's go get mucked up. The SUVs we've assembled here are clearly not direct competitors. Their prices range from less than 10 lakh to over 2 crore. No, we chose these vehicles because they've been launched in the recent past. They all have some form of four-wheel drive, and because they all claim to have at least some off-roading abilities. And yes, we've chosen only one from each manufacturer. We've set up a handful of tests that, though not too difficult by serious off-roading standards, should give all these cars a bit of a challenge. But even with all their capability, it's important to know the right technique. Now we know that most owners don't really take their off-roaders off the road all that much, but what we're here to tell you is that if you wanted to, you could really have a lot of fun with your 4x4. Now I say fun, but you still need to know what you're doing in situations like this, which is why I have with me Autocar India's resident off-road stick in the mud, Rahul Kakkar.
Hi Gavin.
Hey.
So we have the Thar with us, which you know is a proven SUV. It's really serious when it comes to off-roading. So what we're going to do today is we'll take it through various obstacles, and then we'll put the other cars through the same obstacles and see if they can match or even beat it.
Sounds like a plan. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go. The first stage looks simple enough. We just have to drive up this small hill. Piece of cake for the Thar. But it's actually a lot steeper and slipperier than it looks. Let's see how the other cars fare. So I'm now going to attempt the hill climb in the Land Rover Discovery Sport. Now, though it has a lot of technology behind it, it is still a soft roader at heart, but a Land Rover soft roader, so I am confident. Just gotta line it up real good and put it in the right drive mode, which is mud and ruts, and go for it. The Land Rover actually handled it rather well. Perhaps it was let down maybe just a little bit by the tires at first, but then the electronics came in and saved the day. That's technology for you. The next car is decidedly more old school. Right, the Toyota Fortuner, and this car already holds a lot of promise because I can see for miles. I feel like I'm sitting one story high up in the air. It really feels tough, it really feels the business from behind the wheel, and it's got low range, so I don't think this is going to be too difficult. Here we go. There you go. Piece of cake in the Toyota Fortuner. The Fortuner absolutely sailed through that with no effort whatsoever. Now though, it's the turn of the baby Jeep, the Compass. Now this car has a lot riding on it because its first name is Jeep, and that has a lot of off-roading history behind it. However, its second name is Compass, and that means that it is one of the entry-level models in Jeep's range, and therefore maybe we can forgive it just a little bit. Alright, give it a shot, build up the revs. This is a manual gearbox, obviously. Put it in first, keep it there. Four-wheel drive lock on and mud mode. Let's see how it goes. It took a little effort thanks to the engine that needed lots of revs, but it made it. It may not be quite as hardcore as its larger siblings, but this is a Jeep through and through. Up next, the Isuzu D-Max V-Cross. The Isuzu D-Max V-Cross, now one of the more affordable cars here and also one of the most lifestyle oriented, so there is a chance you might take it out just to have a bit of fun. But it still comes with 4-wheel drive and low range, so let's see how good it does. The long wheelbase and lack of weight at the rear did make themselves felt, and it was all about momentum and low range with the Isuzu. Up next, the Tata Hexa, which also has a long wheelbase.
The big Hexa had a few disadvantages right off the bat. It's heavy, it's got a long wheelbase, and though it has a ladder frame chassis, it doesn't have full-on off-road hardware like its sibling, the Safari Storm. The bigger issue we found on the hill climb though was its very short gearing that meant we had to be very clever with the throttle in order to make it up cleanly. A few tries later, it made it though and made way for the Ford Endeavour. After the Fortuner just demolished the hill climb, we expected more of the same from the Endeavour. But its off-road software didn't prove to be quite as effective as the Toyota's traditional but robust hardware. Also, the Endeavour is one heavy SUV, and with the course already turned to slush by the other cars, it was beginning to get bogged down. That doesn't bode well for the big V8 powered AMG Mercedes that had to go next.
So this is the G63 AMG 500 bhp plus. We are attempting the first obstacle, which is a steep incline, really slippery, and thanks to Gavin, he's made it all the more slippery. But we've got 3 differentials working for us here, front, rear and the center. Let's see how it goes. Piece of cake. Amazing. It's so simple. It's really surprising the way it just climbed the slope because it's running road tires which are not off-road tires, but the power is just insane. The way it pulls, it's unbelievable.
Next up is a slush strap that's meant to test traction and stability in slippery conditions. There's a bit of slip and slide as we take the wide left-hand turn at about 30 to 40 kph. Here's where the smooth and steady but brisk wins. No sudden bursts of throttle, no sharp steering inputs. The Fortuner, Endeavour and D-Max are put into 4-wheel drive high as a precaution. But they probably would have managed in 2-wheel drive too. With only the Isuzu's light, unladen rear end exhibiting a bit of a wiggle. We leave the Compass and Hexa in their 4-wheel drive or off-road modes. The Compass fidgets a bit before finding its feet and getting a move on, while the big Hexa understeers wildly but eventually finds its line. The Land Rover's tires do show a little slip at first, while the AMG simply refuses to acknowledge the lack of traction and cruises over the muck like it's tarmac.
The pond we chose to wade through isn't all too deep or very wide, but it does require just the right speed. Too fast and the bonnet will be submerged under a massive splash wave and you could stall. Too slow and the resistance from the water and lack of traction on the mossy, mucky pond floor means you could stall again.
Also, as we found out, it's very easy to be relieved of your front number plate if you splash down too hard. In the Hexa, it proves a bit tricky to find that ideal pace, thanks to very short first and second gears, which means you have to set the pace and hold it well before dipping your tires. It's a similar story in the Compass, which also has a manual, except here you have to rev it out into the mid-range to access the meat of the power band from the 2-litre multijet engine. No such issue in the only other manual, the D-Max V-Cross, which just powers through on a wave of low-end torque.
The automatic cars are much easier to drive smoothly through the water, especially the Fortuner and Endeavour, whose immense ride height keeps the bonnets largely out of the water. The Discovery Sport does scrabble for grip momentarily, but the electronics quickly kick in and haul it out. Well, the G63 doesn't bat an eyelid, and it's as easy as driving through a small puddle.
Though it challenged some cars, the water trap was also quite a lot of fun. But the next test, not so much. And now it's time for the final challenge of the day, and the one I've been dreading this entire time. It is the downhill rock crawl challenge, and well, we're already on our way in the Thar, and it's proving to be quite a challenge.
Well, it is. Let me promise you, it will be really challenging when you get in the other cars that we have today. And it'll let you gauge a lot of things like the ground clearance, the crawling ratio, and also the tire grip. So, all the best with that.
I think I'm gonna need it. Our brains are rattled half out of our skulls going down in the Thar, and for once we're looking forward to the most civilized SUVs. Starting with the Compass, whose compact tracks and wheelbase, good clearance and relatively firm suspension mean it's not likely to bottom out. The somewhat slim tires, however, mean the spotter has to work doubly hard so that we don't lose our footing, and throttle modulation is a little tricky on this motor.
Sure, the three ladder frame tough guys, Endeavour, Fortuner and the V-Cross, do give a commanding pilot's view, but they all tend to bounce around on their mushy suspension. All three do have low range though, so controlling the descent is a lot easier. The Hexa's a ladder frame SUV too, and it acquits itself quite well here, despite the not too great ram breakover angle and wheel articulation.
Land Rover's myriad sensors and electronic aids don't do much to aid the Disco Sport here, as there simply isn't an actual surface to traverse. Its descent is, however, well controlled, and there's a great sense of confidence from behind the wheel. And the G63 just crushes it, right? Well, although it's mechanically superb, this is the one time we have to be extra careful, as there are some sharp rocks that could easily rip a hole in its wide sports tires.
Now, a spotter is key for tricky off-roading. Don't try and do it on your own. There can often be hazards that are out of your line of sight that can seriously damage your SUV if you don't traverse them properly.
And with that tricky final obstacle in the bag, it was time to call it a day. Well, we said at the start that this was all about having fun with your SUV, and I have to say, we had a great time today, didn't we, Rahul?
Absolutely, but it was not only about having fun, but there were some serious challenges to deal with as well.
Well, the cars here are so diverse, all bringing something very different to the table, and yet they all pulled through in the end and managed it with some degree of off-road capability. We can tell you a little bit about all of them, and why don't we start with the Thar?
Well, absolutely. The Mahindra Thar, as we know, it's a serious off-roader. It was built to do only off-road mostly. It does good on road as well, but this is where it really shines, and that's what it did today.
Well, another brand that's most famous for going off-road is Jeep. But the car we have here today, the Compass, is the baby of the range. It's the crossover, it's the family car, and perhaps not quite as capable off-road as its bigger siblings. Or so you would think, because here it is and it's completed just about everything we threw at it. It doesn't have a low range like some of the other cars here, but yet it pulled through with four-wheel drive and a nice stocky diesel engine.
Similarly, no low range in the Hexa as well, but surprising that it is. Look at the long wheelbase that it has. The only shortcoming that it did have was a short power band, which needed a little bit of clutch slipping here and there, but it did the job.
Now, I'm surprised to see that Tata has thrown in some technology at the Hexa. It's got drive modes and electronics that help you do a bit of off-roading. But one car that has none of these things is the Isuzu D-Max V-Cross. It is plain and simple, but so robust. It has low range, so it can do a lot more than you think. And because it's a pickup truck, it's got this extra sort of lifestyle proposition that you just can't deny has a lot of appeal. And it is appealing to a lot of buyers at a great price.
Another fun to drive car is the Ford Endeavour. Well, frankly, the previous Ford Endeavour that we had here in India wasn't really exciting to drive, but this one really lives up to the badge. It's really robust, really powerful engine, light to drive, absolutely easy to drive.
Now, you can't talk about the Ford Endeavour without talking about the Toyota Fortuner, can you? These two have been at each other's throats since day one, and out here it was more of the same. They're very similar, big, tough, ladder frame SUVs, and this one too, the Toyota, it's really robust, and it goes up inclines and down rocky paths with such incredible ease. It was one of the easiest cars to drive today.
But the most surprising and most fun to drive car, without any doubt, is the wildcard, the G63 AMG, which was, Gavin would agree, the most fun to drive.
Well, wildcard is the perfect word for it. It is an AMG with a 550 horsepower V8, for crying out loud. We really didn't think we could push it as hard as we did, but we did, and so did it. It did everything just so easily. And finally, that brings us on to the Land Rover Discovery Sport. Again, another brand known for its off-road ability, but like the Jeep Compass, perhaps as the baby of the range, it wouldn't have as much capability as its bigger siblings. But no, again, we were proven wrong. Through the power of technology and electronics, it just sailed over just about everything. So what we're trying to say here is all these cars have a bit of off-road ability. And yes, some of them aren't quite as strong as each other, and this is not an apples-to-apples comparison. So if you have an SUV that has four-wheel drive, please don't be afraid to take it off the road every once in a while and have a bit of an adventure.
They're built a lot tougher than you think. Take them out there, it'll certainly surprise you.
इसी कभी न रुकने वाले जुनून को रफ्तार देता है सर्वो वर्ल्ड क्लास लुब्रिकेंट्स।